Running Wolf stared at the 6 shivering children huddled around their feverish mother, the tribal elder's decree burning through his mind. Save these white settlers and forfeit your place among the Apache forever. Blood roared in his ears as he made his choice, gathering the smallest child into his arms and stepping toward a future where he would be either hero or traitor, perhaps both. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The winter of 1873 had descended upon the Montana Territory with a vengeance that even the oldest members of the Apache tribe could not recall witnessing before. The wind howled through the pines like 1,000 angry spirits, carrying with it tiny daggers of ice that cut through flesh and chilled the bone. The sky hung low and heavy, a blanket of gray that promised more snow to come. It was in this unforgiving landscape that Running Wolf, one of the most respected warriors of the Black Mountain Apache, found himself tracking a wounded elk through the gathering storm. His breath formed clouds of vapor before him as he moved with the silent grace that had earned him his name. At 32, Running Wolf had the lean, powerful build of a man who had spent his life in the wilderness. His dark eyes, sharp as obsidian arrowheads, missed nothing as they scanned the forest floor for signs of his prey. The tribe needed this meat to survive the harsh winter months ahead. Already their supplies were dwindling, and with the settlers encroaching further into their hunting grounds each season, game had become increasingly scarce. The thought of the white settlers brought a frown to Running Wolf's face, the lines deepening around his mouth. Just 3 moons ago, the Council of Elders had decreed that no Apache would engage with the settlers after a group of soldiers had attacked one of their hunting parties, killing 2 young men. Chief Grey Thunder had been clear: any tribal member who aided the white people would be considered a traitor and banished from the tribe. "They bring nothing but death and disease," the old chief had declared, his voice cracking with age and anger. "They take our land, kill our buffalo, and speak words of peace while holding knives behind their backs." Running Wolf had nodded along with the others. He had seen enough broken promises to know the truth in the chief's words. Yet there had been a time, not so long ago, when he had traded with a fair-minded settler, a man named Daniel Blackwood, who ran a small trading post near Willow Creek. Blackwood had treated the Apache with respect, learning phrases in their language and offering fair trades for their pelts and crafts. Running Wolf had even shared meat from his hunt with the trader's family once, when supplies were low at the post. But that was before the decree, before the soldiers, before the walls between their peoples had grown taller and more impenetrable than the mountains themselves. A sudden shift in the wind brought Running Wolf back to the present. The Elk's trail led westward toward a cluster of abandoned cabins that had once been a small mining settlement. The snow was falling harder now, the flakes thick and heavy, quickly obscuring the trail he had been following. Running Wolf knew he should turn back. The storm was worsening by the minute, and even he, with all his skill, could become lost in such conditions. Yet something drew him forward, an instinct, perhaps, or a whisper from the ancestors that guided his steps. He continued on, pulling his buffalo hide tighter around his shoulders against the bitter cold. The first cabin came into view, a dark silhouette against the white landscape. It stood empty and forlorn, its door hanging crooked from broken hinges. Running Wolf paused, scanning the area. The elk's tracks had disappeared completely under the fresh snow. He was about to turn back when a flicker of movement caught his eye. Smoke. The faintest wisp rising from the chimney of the second cabin. Running Wolf tensed, his hand moving instinctively to the knife at his belt. Settlers this far into the wilderness, in the middle of such a storm, it made no sense. Trappers, perhaps, or deserters from the army. Neither would welcome the sight of an Apache warrior. Caution kept him motionless for long minutes as he watched the cabin. No one emerged. No voices carried on the wind, only that thin thread of smoke suggesting human presence. Finally, curiosity overcame caution. Moving like a shadow, Running Wolf approached the cabin, stepping carefully to avoid making noise in the deepening snow. As he neared, he heard it, a child's cough, weak and rattling, followed by a woman's hushed voice offering comfort. Running Wolf reached the single small window and peered inside. What he saw made his heart constrict within his chest. A woman sat huddled by a pitiful fire that offered more smoke than heat. Her face was gaunt, her skin pale with exhaustion and cold. Around her gathered 6 children of varying ages, from a girl who might have been 12 or 13 to a small boy who could not have seen more than 4 summers. They were wrapped in threadbare blankets, their clothes patched and insufficient for the brutal winter. Even from outside, Running Wolf could see their frail bodies shivering. With a jolt of recognition, he realized who they were. The wife and children of Daniel Blackwood, the trader. But where was Blackwood himself? And what were they doing here, miles from the trading post, in this abandoned cabin with almost no supplies? As if in answer to his unspoken question, the woman, Sarah, he remembered her name was Sarah, began to sing softly to the smallest child, a lullaby filled with such profound sadness that even through the howling wind, Running Wolf could feel the weight of her grief. "Hush now, little one," she whispered when the song ended. "Your father watches over us from heaven. We'll be with him soon if this storm doesn't pass." The truth hit Running Wolf like a physical blow. Blackwood was dead, and his family was about to join him, unless... Running Wolf stood frozen outside the cabin, his mind racing. The decree of the elders echoed in his thoughts like thunder across the plains. No Apache would aid the white settlers. The punishment for disobedience was clear: banishment. To be cast out from the tribe meant more than losing one's home. It meant losing one's identity, one's very soul. The tribe needed him too. As their best hunter, how many would go hungry if he were no longer there to provide? Yet as he watched the woman stir the dying embers with a broken branch, desperately trying to coax more heat from the pathetic fire, something deeper than tribal law pulled at him. There was honor in respecting the decree of the elders, yes, but was there not also honor in preserving life? Daniel Blackwood had shown kindness to the Apache when others showed only hatred and fear. The trader had once given medicine to Running Wolf's sister when she fell ill with the white man's fever. Did such debts die with the man, or did they transfer to those he left behind? A particularly violent gust of wind shook the cabin's walls, sending a shower of snow through a gap in the roof. The smallest child whimpered, and Sarah pulled him closer, whispering words of comfort that even she did not believe. Running Wolf made his decision, law or no law. He could not stand by and watch these innocent ones perish. Taking a deep breath, he moved to the door and knocked firmly. Inside, he heard a gasp, followed by fearful silence. Then footsteps approached, hesitant and unsteady. "Who's there?" Sarah's voice was thin with fear and exhaustion. "Friend," Running Wolf said, his English halting but clear. "I come to help." The door creaked open just enough for Sarah to peer through the gap. Her eyes widened at the sight of the Apache warrior standing on her threshold, snowflakes clinging to his raven black hair and buffalo hide. "You?" she whispered, in recognition. "You're the one who traded with Daniel, Running Wolf?" He nodded, surprised she remembered his name. "Your fire dies, children cold, storm comes stronger now." Sarah's gaze darted between Running Wolf and her children, huddled by the failing fire. Fear and desperation warred on her face. Finally, desperation won. She stepped back, opening the door wider. "Please," she said simply. "Help us." Running Wolf entered the cabin, ducking beneath the low doorframe. The interior was as bleak as he had feared. A few meager possessions were stacked in one corner: a trunk, some cooking utensils, a Bible. The cabin's only furniture was a rickety table, 2 chairs, and a single bed frame covered with straw, and the children's few blankets. The walls were full of cracks that let in the frigid air, and the roof leaked in at least 3 places. The children stared at him with wide, frightened eyes, huddling closer together like a litter of rabbit kits sensing a predator. Only the oldest girl met his gaze directly, her chin lifted in a show of courage that impressed him despite her obvious fear. "It's all right," Sarah told them, though her own voice trembled. He's a friend of your father's." Running Wolf moved to the fireplace and examined the pitiful flame. "No good," he said, looking at the damp, half-rotten wood they were burning. "Need dry wood, need more food." He glanced at Sarah questioningly. "We ran out of proper firewood 2 days ago," she explained, her voice dropping so the children wouldn't hear the extent of their predicament. "The food's almost gone too, just a handful of cornmeal and some dried beans." "How you come here?" Running Wolf asked. "Trading post far." Sarah's shoulders slumped. She looked older than her 29 years, grief and hardship having carved deep lines around her eyes and mouth. "After Daniel died of the fever last fall, the new military commander said I had to leave the trading post, said it wasn't proper for a woman alone to run such an establishment in Indian territory." Bitterness crept into her voice. "We were heading to Fort Benton, where my cousin lives, but the wagon broke down in the first snowstorm 3 weeks ago. We found this place and thought we could wait out the winter, but..." She glanced at her children, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't know it would be so harsh. I didn't know we'd be trapped." Running Wolf understood then. They were here because they had nowhere else to go, no one to help them, no way to escape the approaching storm that would surely claim their lives before morning if left in their current state. "The youngest one is sick," Sarah continued, nodding toward the small boy who coughed weakly in his sister's arms. "Thomas needs medicine, warm food. They all do." Running Wolf crossed to the child and knelt beside him. The boy's skin burned with fever, yet he shivered violently. Without proper care, he would not last the night, and the others would soon follow. Looking around at the hopeless scene, Running Wolf made a second, even more difficult decision. Helping them here in this broken cabin with no supplies was futile. There was only one way to save this family. "You come," he said firmly, standing up. "All come. My people have shelter, food, medicine." Sarah stared at him in shock. "Go with you to your tribe," but I thought, "No questions now," Running Wolf interrupted. "Storm grows, must leave quickly. But will your people accept us? Won't they be angry?" Running Wolf turned away, unable to meet her gaze. How could he explain that by bringing them to the tribe, he was choosing exile for himself? That the moment he appeared with these settlers, he would be cast out from the only life he had ever known. "I deal with tribe," he said simply. "You get children ready. Now." As Sarah hurried to prepare her children for the journey, wrapping them in what pitiful protection they had against the storm, Running Wolf stepped outside to scan the sky. The blizzard was intensifying, the daylight already fading, though it was barely past noon. They would have to move quickly to reach the Apache camp before nightfall. He could still turn back, still hunt the elk, return to his people with meat instead of forbidden guests, pretend he had never seen the dying family in the abandoned cabin. No one would ever know. But Running Wolf knew he could never live with that choice. His ancestors would turn their faces from him if he abandoned this family to die when he had the power to save them. With a deep breath that crystallized in the freezing air, he returned to the cabin. Inside, Sarah was wrapping her youngest in a threadbare blanket, while the oldest girl, Emma, helped the other children prepare. A boy of about 10 was solemnly tying strips of cloth around his younger sister's shoes in a futile attempt to provide more warmth. "No good," Running Wolf said, eyeing their inadequate clothing. He shrugged off his buffalo hide and handed it to Sarah. "For small ones." Sarah looked at him in alarm. "But you'll freeze without this." Running Wolf shook his head. "I have more." It was a lie, but necessary. From his pack, he pulled out a second, smaller hide he'd been using to wrap the game he'd hoped to catch. "This for you." The oldest boy, who looked to be about 8, stared at Running Wolf with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Are you really taking us to your village?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Running Wolf nodded. "Yes, safe there." "But Pa said Indians scalp white folk," the boy continued, his eyes wide. "James!" Sarah scolded, her face flushing with embarrassment. "That's not—" Running Wolf raised a hand to stop her. He knelt to the boy's level, looking him directly in the eyes. "Some white men say this. Some white men also steal Indian land, kill Indian children." His voice was calm, not accusatory. "All people have good hearts and bad hearts. Your father had good heart. He respect Apache. Apache respect him." James seemed to consider this carefully, then gave a small nod of understanding. As Sarah gathered the last of their meager possessions, a family Bible, a small pouch that jingled with what Running Wolf assumed were coins, and a framed daguerreotype of a man he recognized as Daniel Blackwood, the oldest girl approached him. "I'm Emma," she said, standing as tall as her 13 years would allow. "And I want to thank you for helping us, even though I don't understand why you would." There was something in her direct gaze that reminded Running Wolf of his younger sister. The same quiet strength, the same protective instinct toward her siblings. He inclined his head in acknowledgement of her courage. "Your father helped my people once," he said simply. "Now I help his family." Outside, the storm had intensified, the wind driving the snow horizontally across the landscape. Running Wolf assessed their situation grimly. 7 people, including 4 small children, had to travel 5 miles through a raging blizzard to reach the Apache camp. Under normal conditions, it would be a journey of less than 2 hours. In this storm, with these companions, it could take twice as long, if they made it at all. "Stay close," he instructed, as they stepped outside into the swirling white. "Follow my steps exactly." He arranged them in a line, himself at the front to break trail, then Sarah carrying 4-year-old Thomas, who was too weak to walk, followed by the other children in order of age, Emma, James, then 9-year-old Rebecca, 7-year-old William, and finally 6-year-old Mary. Emma held one end of a leather strip Running Wolf had cut from his pack, with each child grasping it along its length so they wouldn't become separated in the blinding snow. The first 100 yards were the hardest. The wind seemed determined to push them back to the cabin, and the snow, already knee-deep in places, clutched at their legs like a living thing trying to drag them down. Running Wolf forged ahead, using his body as a shield to create a partial windbreak for those behind him. Little Mary stumbled and fell after only a few minutes, disappearing momentarily in a drift. James turned back, pulling her up with a determination beyond his years. Running Wolf watched the interaction with approval. These children were fighters, like their mother. Perhaps they had a chance after all. An hour into their journey, Running Wolf realized they had covered less than half the distance to the camp. The storm showed no signs of abating. If anything, it had grown stronger. The temperature was dropping rapidly as evening approached, and even with the buffalo hide wrapped around the smallest children, They were dangerously cold. "Must rest," he announced, guiding them toward a cluster of pines that offered some shelter from the relentless wind. A build snow wall, trap heat. Working quickly, he showed them how to pack snow into blocks, creating a semicircular barrier against the wind. Within this crude shelter, they huddled together for warmth. Thomas's breathing had grown more labored, his small face flushed with fever despite the cold. Sarah looked up at Running Wolf, naked fear in her eyes. "He needs help soon," she whispered, her voice cracking. Running Wolf nodded grimly. "We go again soon, not safe to stay." As they rested, 6-year-old Mary inched closer to Running Wolf, her curiosity apparently overcoming her fear. "Are you really a wolf?" she asked, her blue eyes wide in her wind-reddened face. Despite the gravity of their situation, Running Wolf felt the corner of his mouth twitch. "No, little one. Name is Running Wolf because as boy, I run fast like wolf." "I can run fast too," she declared proudly. "Upa said I was quick as a jackrabbit." A pang of sadness touched Running Wolf's heart at the mention of the girl's father. "Your father spoke truth," he said gently. "You brave like jackrabbit too." While they talked, Emma had been watching the sky with growing concern. "The sun's going down," she observed. "How much farther to your camp?" "Not far," Running Wolf assured her, though in truth, the journey ahead remained treacherous. "Must go now. Night comes, gets colder." As they prepared to set out again, Running Wolf noticed Sarah swaying slightly as she stood, her face alarmingly pale beneath her hood. She had given most of her share of the buffalo hide to the children and was suffering for it. Without a word, he moved to her side and took Thomas from her arms. "I carry boy, you save strength." For a moment, it seemed she would protest, but exhaustion won out. She nodded gratefully, her eyes filling with tears she was too proud to shed. Thomas felt like nothing in Running Wolf's arms, a bundle of sticks wrapped in cloth. The boy's head lolled against his chest, his breathing shallow. Running Wolf tucked him securely inside his buckskin shirt, sharing his body heat directly with the child. "Stay close," he instructed again as they ventured back into the storm. Not much farther now." It was a lie meant to give them courage, but Running Wolf feared it might be the last kindness he could offer them. The temperature continued to plummet as darkness fell, and the wind cut through their clothing like knives of ice. If they didn't reach the Apache camp soon, the night would claim them all, and his decision to help would have changed nothing except to add his own death to theirs. As they struggled forward, each step an act of defiance against the elements, Running Wolf found himself praying to the spirits of his ancestors. Not for himself, his fate was sealed the moment he decided to bring settlers to the tribal camp, but for these innocent children who deserved a chance at life. Night had fully descended when they finally glimpsed the faint glow of firelight through the trees. Running Wolf felt a surge of both relief and dread. They had made it to the Apache camp against all odds, but now he would face the consequences of his decision. "There," he said, pointing toward the lights, "my people." Sarah looked up, her face haggard with exhaustion. For hours, she had pushed forward without complaint, though Running Wolf could see the toll the journey had taken on her. The children, too, were nearing the end of their endurance. Even Emma's determined stride had faltered, and little Mary was being half-carried by James, whose own steps dragged in the deepening snow. "Will they?" Sarah began, her voice faltering. "Will they turn us away?" Running Wolf didn't answer. Instead, he adjusted Thomas in his arms. The boy's breathing had grown increasingly labored during their journey, his small body burning with fever despite the freezing temperatures. "Medicine woman help sick boy," he said finally. "Rest comes after." As they approached the camp's edge, Running Wolf could make out the shapes of the wickiups, dome-shaped dwellings covered with brush and hides, arranged in the traditional circle. Smoke rose from the central fire where, even in such weather, some of the elders would be gathered to share stories and wisdom. Running Wolf took a deep breath and stepped into the clearing, the Blackwood family close behind him. The reaction was immediate. A young warrior on watch duty spotted them first, calling out in Apache. Figures emerged from the nearest dwellings, their expressions changing from curiosity to shock as they recognized Running Wolf at the head of a group of white settlers. "Stay behind me," Running Wolf murmured to Sarah. "Do not show fear." Chief Grey Thunder appeared from the largest wickiup, his ancient face a mask of disbelief as he took in the scene before him. He was flanked by Swift Arrow, Running Wolf's chief rival within the tribe, and Singing Bird, the tribe's medicine woman. "What is this?" Grey Thunder demanded in Apache, his voice like gravel. "Have you lost your mind, Running Wolf? You bring the white enemy into our camp." Running Wolf stepped forward, still cradling the feverish Thomas. "They are not enemies," he replied in their language. "This is the family of Daniel Blackwood, the trader who treated our people with respect. He is dead, and they were dying in the storm. The smallest one needs Singing Bird's healing touch." Swift Arrow spat on the ground. "You have betrayed us." "The council decreed no Apache would aid the settlers. You were there when we made this law." More tribal members had gathered now, forming a loose circle around the newcomers. Running Wolf could see the mixture of emotions on their faces: anger, fear, confusion, and in a few, like Singing Bird, a reluctant compassion. "I have not forgotten the law," Running Wolf said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet camp. "And I know the price of what I have done, but I could not leave innocent children to die when it was within my power to save them." "The white man would not show such mercy to our children," Swift Arrow countered bitterly. "They kill our people, steal our land, and you bring them here like honored guests. Enough." Grey Thunder's command silenced the growing murmurs. The old chief stepped closer, his eyes not on Running Wolf, but on the small bundle in his arms. Thomas chose that moment to cough weakly, his tiny body convulsing with the effort. Something shifted in Grey Thunder's weathered face. He had lost his own grandson to fever the previous winter, and perhaps he saw in Thomas's suffering an echo of that personal tragedy. "Singing Bird," he said quietly. "Look at the child." The medicine woman moved forward without hesitation. She was in her 50s, her face lined with wisdom rather than bitterness. She gently touched Thomas's forehead, checked his pulse, and listened to his labored breathing. "He has the lung sickness," she said in Apache. "Without treatment, he will be with the spirits before dawn." Grey Thunder nodded slowly, then turned to Running Wolf. "You know our law?" "I do," Running Wolf replied steadily, "and I accept the consequences of breaking it." "No!" The voice came from behind him. Sarah had stepped forward, her face pale but determined. Though she couldn't understand their words, she had clearly grasped the tension of the moment. "Please, don't punish him for helping us. If you must blame someone, blame me. I'll go back into the storm if you'll just help my children." Running Wolf was startled when Grey Thunder responded to Sarah in halting but understandable English. "Woman, you speak brave words for mother with young ones." Sarah straightened, summoning what dignity she could in her bedraggled state. "My husband respected your people. He taught our children that the Apache were honorable. Running Wolf has proven him right by saving us when he could have left us to die." A long silence followed her words. The tribe watched Grey Thunder, waiting for his judgment. The old chief's eyes moved from Sarah to her children huddled behind her, then to Running Wolf, and finally to the tribal members gathered around them. "The law is clear," he said at last. returning to Apache. Running Wolf has brought outsiders to our camp against the council's decree. The punishment is banishment. He paused, his gaze lingering on Thomas. But tonight is not the night for such matters. Singing Bird will tend to the sick child. The others will be given shelter until the storm passes. Tomorrow, the council will meet to decide what must be done. Relief washed over Running Wolf, though he knew it was only a temporary reprieve. Nice, thank you, my chief. Grey Thunder's expression hardened. Do not thank me yet, Running Wolf. You have placed me in a difficult position. The law exists to protect our people, and you have broken it. I understand, Running Wolf replied solemnly. Swift Arrow stepped forward, his face dark with anger. You cannot allow this. These white people will bring others. They will see where we camp, how many we are, what weapons we have. Silence! Grey Thunder cut him off. I have spoken. The matter will be decided tomorrow. He turned to the gathered tribe members. Prepare the empty wickiup near Singing Bird's dwelling for the woman and her children. Bring food and blankets. As the crowd dispersed to carry out these orders, Grey Thunder approached Running Wolf and spoke in a voice too low for others to hear. You have always been like a son to me. Why did you do this thing, knowing it would force my hand? Running Wolf met the old man's gaze steadily. Because there are laws made by men, and there are laws that live in the heart. Sometimes they cannot both be followed. Grey Thunder studied him for a long moment, then sighed heavily. Give the child to Singing Bird. She will do what she can for him. Reluctantly, Running Wolf surrendered Thomas to the medicine woman's capable hands. Sarah watched anxiously as Singing Bird carried her son toward her dwelling. Will she be able to help him? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Singing Bird knows many medicines, Running Wolf assured her. She has healed many with lung sickness. And what about you? Sarah pressed, her eyes searching his face. What will happen to you for bringing us here? Running Wolf looked away, unable to meet her gaze. Do not worry about me. Come, you and other children need food, rest. As he led the exhausted family toward the wickiup being prepared for them, Running Wolf felt the weight of many eyes upon him. Some gazes held condemnation, others confusion, and a few, particularly from the mothers of the tribe, reflected a reluctant understanding. Whatever tomorrow would bring, he had made his choice. He had followed the law of his heart, even knowing it would cost him everything he had ever known. The wickiup assigned to the Blackwood family was small, but well constructed, its frame of bent saplings covered with layers of brush and hides that kept the howling wind at bay. A fire burned in a shallow pit at the center, filling the space with warmth and the fragrance of burning cedar. Fresh furs had been laid on the ground, and several tribal women had brought blankets, though their faces remained guarded as they silently delivered these necessities. Sarah sat near the fire, her body finally beginning to thaw after their harrowing journey. Emma, James, Rebecca, William, and Mary had already succumbed to exhaustion, huddled together beneath the blankets like a litter of puppies seeking each other's warmth. Their faces, relaxed in sleep, looked younger than they had hours before when fear and cold had etched temporary lines of adulthood across their features. Sarah, however, could not rest. Her eyes remained fixed on the wickiup's entrance, waiting for news of Thomas. Running Wolf had disappeared shortly after settling them in their temporary shelter, and though she understood his need to speak with his people, his absence left her feeling strangely vulnerable. A rustling at the entrance drew her attention. A woman entered, bearing a wooden bowl of steaming stew. She was perhaps in her 30s, with a kind face that showed neither the hostility of Swift Arrow nor the cautious neutrality of most other tribal members. "It's," the woman said in carefully pronounced English, offering the bowl. "Good food makes strong." Sarah accepted the bowl gratefully. "Thank you. My name is Sarah Blackwood." The woman hesitated, then touched her chest. "Willow dance." Sarah smiled, taking a spoonful of the stew. The rich flavor of venison and unfamiliar herbs spread across her tongue, and she suddenly realized how desperately hungry she was. "It's delicious," she said, taking another spoonful. Willow Dance nodded, seeming pleased. She glanced at the sleeping children, then back at Sarah. Many children, much work for mother alone. "Yes," Sarah agreed softly. "Since their father died, it's been difficult." Willow Dance's eyes softened with understanding. "I lose husband 2 winters past. Apache raid with Comanche." She sat down across from Sarah. "A hard path for woman alone." Sarah was struck by this unexpected connection between them, 2 widows from different worlds, each struggling to raise their children in a harsh and unforgiving land. "Do you have children?" she asked. 2 sons, Willow Dance replied, 12 summers and 9 summers. Before their conversation could continue, the entrance rustled again. This time, it was Singing Bird who entered, carrying Thomas wrapped in a soft deerskin blanket. Sarah scrambled to her feet, her heart in her throat. "My son, is he—" "Boy, sleep now," Singing Bird said, her English more fluent than Willow Dance's. "Fever still high, but he take medicine good. Lungs need time to heal." Sarah reached for Thomas, tears of relief springing to her eyes as she felt his body was indeed less burning to the touch than before. His breathing, while still congested, seemed less labored. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." Singing Bird nodded gravely. "Keep him warm. Give medicine when he wake." She handed Sarah a small pouch of dried herbs. "Mix with hot water. And taste bad but good medicine." "I will," Sarah promised, cradling Thomas close. "What can I do to repay your kindness?" Singing Bird's expression became unreadable. "No talk of payment now. Rest." She turned to leave, then paused. "Running Wolf bring big trouble on himself for your family. He good man with strong heart." After Singing Bird departed, Willow Dance helped Sarah make a comfortable spot for Thomas near the fire. The boy stirred briefly but didn't wake, his small face still flushed with fever, but more peaceful than it had been during their desperate journey. "Running Wolf," Sarah said hesitantly to Willow Dance. "What will happen to him?" The chief seemed very angry. Willow Dance's face grew troubled. "Tribal law clear. No help white settlers. Running Wolf know this. He choose to break law. But surely they'll understand why he did it. He couldn't just leave us to die in that storm. Some understand, some not," Willow Dance sighed. "Swift Arrow speak against Running Wolf for long time. Say he too friendly with white people. Now Swift Arrow have proof." Sarah felt a wave of guilt wash over her. Running Wolf had sacrificed his standing in the tribe, perhaps even his place within it, to save her family. "There must be something I can do," she said. "I could speak to the chief, explain that it was all my fault." Willow Dance shook her head. "Chief Grey Thunder already decide to wait until storm pass, then council meet. Running Wolf no consequences when he bring you here." After Willow Dance left, Sarah sat alone by the fire, lost in troubled thoughts. Outside, the blizzard continued to rage, its howling a reminder of how close they had come to perishing. Her children slept soundly, safe and warm for the first time in weeks, yet she could take little comfort in this reprieve, knowing it had come at such a high cost to the man who had saved them. A soft noise at the entrance drew her attention once more. Running Wolf stood there, his tall frame silhouetted against the darkness outside. Snow dusted his shoulders and hair, indicating he had been outdoors in the storm. "May I enter?" he asked quietly. "Of course," Sarah replied, equally soft so as not to wake the children. Running Wolf stepped inside, his gaze immediately going to Thomas. "How is boy?" "Better, I think. Singing Bird gave him medicine. She says his lungs need time to heal, but..." Sarah's voice caught. "She gave me hope. Before you found us, I was beginning to think I would lose him." Running Wolf nodded, his expression somber. "Singing Bird knows many medicines. Boy strong, like mother, he will heal." "And what about you?" Sarah asked, unable to keep the concern from her voice. "Willow Dance told me you're in serious trouble for helping us." A ghost of a smile touched Running Wolf's lips. "Willow Dance talks much. She was kind to me," Sarah defended, "one of the few who seemed willing to even look at me." "Willow Dance lost husband to white men," Running Wolf said. "But she not let hate fill heart. Good woman." They sat in silence for a moment, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the soft breathing of the sleeping children. "I have spoken with elders," Running Wolf said finally. "Some listen, some not. Tomorrow, when storm end, council will meet." "And then what happens?" Sarah pressed. Running Wolf's eyes reflected the firelight, dark and unfathomable. "Law is law. Price for breaking it is banishment." "No!" Sarah's exclamation came out louder than intended, causing Emma to stir briefly before settling back into sleep. More quietly, she continued, "That's not fair. You saved our lives. Surely they can't punish you for that." "Tribal way different from white way," Running Wolf explained patiently. "Law not just for punishment, law for protection. My people survive because they follow laws of tribe, laws of nature. But to cast you out completely, where would you go? What would you do?" Running Wolf shrugged, the gesture deceptively casual. "I am hunter. I survive." Sarah studied his face, reading the resignation there despite his attempt to appear unconcerned. "I won't let this happen," she said firmly. "When the council meets, I'll speak for you. I'll make them understand." Running Wolf shook his head. "No, Sarah Blackwood, this my choice, my consequence. But my children and I are the reason you're facing this consequence. I can't just stand by and..." "You focus on children," Running Wolf interrupted gently. "Keep Thomas warm. Rest. Tomorrow brings what it brings." Before Sarah could argue further, a commotion outside drew their attention. Voices raised in alarm, footsteps hurrying through snow. Running Wolf was on his feet instantly, moving to the entrance. "Stay here," he instructed, then disappeared into the night. Sarah waited anxiously, straining to hear what was happening. The voices outside grew more numerous, though the words in Apache meant nothing to her. After what seemed an eternity, Running Wolf returned, his expression grave. "What is it?" Sarah asked. "What's happening?" "Riders come," he said tersely. "White men, soldiers." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Soldiers? Here? How could they possibly? No time." Running Wolf cut her off. "Stay inside. Keep children quiet." Before she could respond, he was gone again, leaving her alone with her sleeping children and a growing sense of dread. What were soldiers doing out in this blizzard? Had they somehow followed her family's trail? Or was it mere coincidence, a patrol caught in the storm, seeking shelter wherever they could find it? Outside, the Apache camp had erupted into controlled chaos. Warriors retrieved weapons from their wiki-ups, women gathered children close, and elders conferred urgently near the central fire. Running Wolf made his way to Chief Grey Thunder, who stood with Swift Arrow and several other tribal leaders at the camp's perimeter. "How many?" Running Wolf asked as he joined them. 6 riders. Swift Arrow replied tersely. "Army scouts, based on their dress. They are still on the ridge, watching our camp." "They must have seen our fires," another warrior suggested. Chief Grey Thunder's face was impassive, but Running Wolf could see the calculation in his eyes. 6 soldiers posed no real threat to the camp's 30 warriors, but their presence likely meant more soldiers nearby, and if these scouts did not return, those others would come looking. "What do they want?" Running Wolf asked. Swift Arrow turned on him, his eyes flashing with barely contained rage. "They come because of you. Because you brought the white woman here. Did you think she came alone? Her husband probably owed debts. These soldiers come to collect, and now they find our winter camp." "Enough," Grey Thunder said firmly. "We do not know why they have come. Running Wolf, you speak the white man's tongue better than most. You will go with Swift Arrow and 2 others to meet these soldiers. Do not bring them into the camp, but learn their purpose." Running Wolf nodded, though the prospect of facing white soldiers alongside Swift Arrow, who clearly wished him harm, was far from appealing. "And if their purpose involves the Blackwood family?" Grey Thunder's gaze hardened. "You created this situation, Running Wolf. Now you must deal with its consequences." As Running Wolf and Swift Arrow prepared to leave, Singing Bird approached. She spoke quietly to Grey Thunder, who listened with uncharacteristic patience before nodding slowly. "Running Wolf," the chief called. "Singing Bird says the white child cannot be moved. His sickness is too severe. Remember this when you speak to the soldiers." The implication was clear. Whatever happened, the Blackwoods must remain in the camp until Thomas was well enough to travel. Running Wolf felt the weight of this additional responsibility settle on his shoulders. He had already sacrificed his place in the tribe for this family. Now he might need to risk his life as well. 4 Apache warriors, including Running Wolf and Swift Arrow, rode out to meet the soldiers. The blizzard had eased somewhat, though snow still fell steadily and the wind remained bitter. They found the soldiers where the scouts had reported, huddled on the ridge overlooking the camp. The soldiers raised their rifles as the Apache approached, their faces tense with cold and wariness. Running Wolf raised his empty hands to show he carried no weapon, though Swift Arrow and the others kept their bows ready. "We come to talk," Running Wolf called out in English. "Why soldiers here in storm?" The apparent leader of the group, a sergeant with a frost-encrusted beard, urged his horse forward a few steps. "We're looking for settlers," he replied. "A woman and 6 children. Their wagon was found abandoned near Willow Creek 3 weeks ago." "Are they in your camp?" Running Wolf exchanged a glance with Swift Arrow, whose expression clearly said, "I told you so." This confirmation that the soldiers were indeed looking for the Blackwoods complicated matters considerably. "Why you look for them?" Running Wolf asked, buying time to think. "That's not your concern, Indian." Another soldier spat, but the sergeant raised a hand to silence him. "Mrs. Blackwood has family concerned for her welfare," the sergeant explained more diplomatically. "Her cousin in Fort Benton reported her missing when she failed to arrive as expected. We've been searching since the weather cleared enough to travel." Running Wolf weighed his options carefully. Lying would only delay the inevitable. The soldiers had clearly spotted the camp and wouldn't leave without searching it. But admitting the Blackwoods were there might lead to immediate demands for their surrender. "Women and children here," he acknowledged finally. "Found them dying in cabin. Smallest child, very sick. Cannot travel." Swift Arrow hissed in disapproval, but Running Wolf ignored him. The sergeant's posture relaxed slightly. "They're alive then. That's good news." He studied Running Wolf's face. "You say the youngest is ill?" "Lung sickness." "A medicine woman treats him now." The sergeant conferred briefly with his men, then turned back to Running Wolf. We need to see them, verify their condition ourselves. No white men in camp, Swift Arrow interjected in halting English. You wait here, we bring woman. The sergeant shook his head. That won't do. We have orders to escort them to Fort Benton. If the child is too sick to travel, one of us needs to assess his condition. So your medicine man can declare him fit to die in the snow? Swift Arrow sneered. Tension crackled between the two groups, hands tightening on weapons. Running Wolf saw the situation deteriorating rapidly. One man, he proposed, sergeant only, come see boy, speak to mother, then decide. After another consultation, the sergeant agreed, just me, then. The rest of my men will wait here. Swift Arrow leaned close to Running Wolf as they prepared to escort the sergeant back to camp. You trust these white soldiers too easily, he whispered harshly in Apache. When they slaughter us in our sleep, I will find you in the afterlife and remind you of this moment. Running Wolf met his gaze steadily. If I wanted to betray our people, I would have led the entire patrol to the camp. I am trying to prevent bloodshed. No, Swift Arrow replied coldly. You are trying to protect the white woman who has bewitched you. The tribe comes second in your heart now. The accusation stung, partly because Running Wolf couldn't entirely deny it. Sarah Blackwood and her children had indeed changed something within him. But his actions weren't a betrayal of his people. They were an expression of the values the Apache had taught him: courage, compassion, and respect for all life. As they rode back toward the camp with the sergeant, Running Wolf wondered if he could make the others understand that distinction before it was too late. Word of the soldiers' arrival had spread throughout the camp by the time Running Wolf returned with the sergeant. Chief Grey Thunder had ordered the women and children to remain in their wickiups, while warriors positioned themselves strategically around the perimeter, watching the lone white soldier with barely concealed hostility. Sarah was standing outside her assigned dwelling, her face pale but determined. Emma stood beside her, holding a sleepy William by the hand, while James peered curiously at the sergeant from behind his mother's skirts. Rebecca and Mary remained inside with Thomas. Mrs. Blackwood, the sergeant said, removing his hat as he dismounted. I'm Sergeant Miller, 2nd Cavalry. Your cousin in Fort Benton has been worried sick about you. Cousin Martha sent you? Sarah asked, surprised. How did you find us in this wilderness? We've been searching since your wagon was discovered 3 weeks ago. Found your trail to that old mining cabin, then lost it in the storm. Pure luck we spotted the fires of this camp. Miller glanced around at the watching Apache, his discomfort evident despite his efforts to appear calm. Mom, I need to speak with you privately. Anything you have to say can be said in front of Running Wolf, Sarah replied firmly. He saved our lives when no one else would. Miller's eyebrows rose slightly at her defense of the Apache warrior, but he nodded. As you wish, Mrs. Blackwood. We have orders to escort you and your children to Fort Benton as soon as possible. Your cousin has arranged accommodations for you there. My youngest son is very ill, Sergeant. He can't possibly travel in this weather. So I've been told. May I see him? Sarah hesitated, then nodded. This way. She led the sergeant into the wickiup, where Thomas lay wrapped in furs near the fire, his breathing still labored but less desperate than the previous day. Singing Bird sat beside him, grinding herbs in a small stone mortar. She looked up as they entered, her face expressionless as she regarded the white soldier. Miller knelt beside the child, his weathered face softening as he observed Thomas's condition. He felt the boy's forehead, checked his pulse, and listened to his breathing. Pneumonia, most likely, he concluded, rising. He's in no condition to travel, that's certain. He turned to Sarah. "The rest of you could come with us now. We could send a wagon for the boy and whoever stays with him once he's stronger." "I won't separate my family," Sarah said immediately. "We stay together." Miller sighed. "Mrs. Blackwood, I don't think you understand your situation. You're in an Apache camp, the same Apache who've been raiding settlements all across the territory. It's not safe for you or your children. These people have shown us nothing but kindness," Sarah countered, her voice rising slightly. "They've fed us, sheltered us, and their medicine woman has been treating Thomas when your army doctors were nowhere to be found." Running Wolf, who had remained silent by the entrance, felt a surge of admiration for Sarah's spirited defense. But he also recognized the flash of suspicion in Miller's eyes as he looked between them. "Mrs. Blackwood," the sergeant said carefully, "I understand you feel grateful, but my duty is to ensure your safety. The territories are no place for a woman alone with 6 children." "I'm not alone," Sarah replied, her gaze briefly meeting Running Wolf's. "And I know my own mind, Sergeant. My children and I will remain here until Thomas is well enough to travel safely." Miller looked as though he wanted to argue further, but instead he nodded stiffly. "Very well. I'll report your decision to my commanding officer. But I must warn you, he may not accept it as easily as I have." As they exited the wickiup, Chief Grey Thunder approached, his face a careful mask of diplomatic neutrality. "The woman and sick child stay until storm ends and boy heals," he stated in his limited English. "Then they go to fort." Miller studied the old chief, clearly trying to gauge whether this was an offer or a demand. "And your tribe will ensure their safety until then. They under my protection," Grey Thunder confirmed. "No harm come to them." The sergeant turned to Running Wolf. "Translate something for me. Tell your chief that I'll return in 3 days with a wagon and a doctor. If the boy is improved, we'll take them all to Fort Benton then. If not, we'll reassess." Running Wolf relayed this message in Apache, adding for Grey Thunder's benefit, "He does not say what will happen if we refuse to release them." The chief's eyes narrowed slightly. "Tell him 3 days is acceptable. Also tell him our hunters see much from high places. If many soldiers come, we know before they arrive." Miller received this thinly veiled warning with a tight smile after Running Wolf translated. No one wants trouble, Chief. We just want to see Mrs. Blackwood and her children safely settled." After a few more exchanges, the sergeant prepared to depart. As he mounted his horse, he looked down at Sarah. 3 days, Mrs. Blackwood. I'll return with a doctor and proper transportation." "Thank you, Sergeant," Sarah replied. "Please tell Martha we're alive and we'll join her soon." As Miller rode away to rejoin his men on the ridge, an uneasy silence fell over the camp. It was broken by Swift Arrow, who approached Chief Grey Thunder with barely contained anger. "You should not have agreed to their terms," he said in Apache, loud enough for all to hear. "They will return with more soldiers. They will demand the woman and children, and if we refuse, they will attack." "All because of him." He jabbed a finger toward Running Wolf. Several others murmured in agreement, but Singing Bird stepped forward from the wickiup. "The child would have died without our help," she said calmly. "Would you have preferred Running Wolf leave them to perish in the storm? Is that the honor of the Apache?" "Our first duty is to our own people," Swift Arrow insisted. "Running Wolf has placed the entire tribe in danger for the sake of white settlers. Their soldiers now know the location of our winter camp." The debate continued, with tribal members taking sides. Running Wolf noticed that while many of the warriors supported Swift Arrow, most of the women, especially those with children, seemed to understand his decision to help the Blackwoods. Through it all, Sarah stood silently watching, unable to understand the words, but clearly sensing that she and her children were the center of a tribal dispute that threatened to tear the Apache community apart. Later, as the council disbanded with the agreement to meet formally when the storm ended, Running Wolf found Sarah sitting alone outside her wickiup, staring at the falling snow. "When I've caused you nothing but trouble," she said quietly as he approached. "I'm sorry." Running Wolf sat beside her on the fallen log that served as a bench. "You not cause trouble, I make choice. My choice." "But you're going to lose everything because of us." Sarah turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "The sergeant told me what banishment means for your people. It's not just leaving the tribe, it's being cut off from everything that makes you who you are." Running Wolf was silent for a moment, watching the snowflakes dissolve as they touched the ground near the fire. "My father teach me as boy," he said finally. "Apache warrior protects those who cannot protect selves. This is honor. This is being Apache." He looked at her directly. "I not lose who I am by helping you. I become more who I should be." Sarah's breath caught at the simple dignity in his words. "The world would be a better place if more men thought as you do," she said softly. A small sound drew their attention. Emma stood in the entrance of the wickiup, her young face solemn as she regarded them. "Thomas is awake," she said. "He's asking for you, Ma." Sarah rose immediately, but before she entered the dwelling, she placed her hand briefly on Running Wolf's arm. The touch was light, almost imperceptible, but it carried a weight of meaning that neither of them could have expressed in words. Inside, Running Wolf could hear Sarah's gentle voice speaking to her son, the boy's weak responses, and the soft laughter of the other children as they gathered around their youngest sibling. The sounds of a family, wounded, frightened, but intact and alive, filled the small space. Outside, the storm was finally beginning to wane, the snowfall lighter, the wind less biting. And with the clearing weather, Running Wolf knew, would come decisions that could not be delayed. The tribal council would meet, the soldiers would return, and the fragile peace that had settled over the camp would be tested in ways none of them could fully predict. But for now, in this moment, there was only the sound of children's voices, the warmth of the fire, and the knowledge that whatever came next, he had followed the truest path his heart could find. The storm broke at dawn on the second day, the sky clearing to a crystalline blue that belied the bitter cold still gripping the land. With the improved weather came activity throughout the camp. Warriors ventured out to hunt, women gathered to prepare hides and foods, and children emerged from wickiups to play in the fresh snow, their laughter a stark contrast to the tension that still lingered among the adults. Inside the medicine woman's dwelling, Thomas sat propped against a pile of furs, his fever finally broken. Though still weak, his breathing had eased considerably, and he had even managed to eat a small bowl of broth that morning. Sarah sat beside him, relief evident in every line of her face as she watched him interact with Singing Bird, who was showing him how to grind herbs in her small stone mortar. "Is this the medicine that made me better?" Thomas asked, his voice still raspy but stronger than it had been. Singing Bird nodded, a rare smile softening her weathered features. "This medicine good for chest, help breathing. Could you teach me how to make it?" The boy's earnest question surprised both women. Singing Bird glanced at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Thomas. Perhaps you could help other children who get sick." The medicine woman seemed pleased by this suggestion. "Yes, I teach. Medicine knowledge should pass to those who wish to learn." Outside, Sarah's other children had gradually integrated themselves into the camp's daily life. James had attached himself to a group of Apache boys who were constructing snow forts for a mock battle, his initial shyness forgotten in the universal language of children's play. Emma, ever responsible, was helping Willow dance and other women prepare hides, her quick hands proving adept at the unfamiliar work. Even shy Rebecca had found a place, sitting with an elderly woman who was teaching her to weave a small basket. Only Mary remained somewhat withdrawn, staying close to the wickiup where Sarah tended to Thomas. The 6-year-old watched the Apache children with wistful eyes, but lacked the courage to join their games without her mother's direct encouragement. It was Running Wolf who finally coaxed her from her shell. He approached as she sat making patterns in the snow with a stick, her small face solemn. "Little jackrabbit not play with others?" he asked, crouching beside her. Mary looked up, her blue eyes serious. They talked different. "They won't understand me," Running Wolf considered this. "When I small boy, I not speak English, but I play with son of trader near mountains. We not need many words." "Really?" Mary seemed skeptical. "What did you play?" "We hunt lizards, build small houses from sticks, race on foot." He pointed to where several children were sliding down a small hill on pieces of bark. "See? They not need words for that game." Mary watched the laughing children thoughtfully. "Do you think they'd let me try?" "Yes," Running Wolf said confidently. "I take you." He extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Mary placed her small one in his. Together, they walked toward the hill, where Running Wolf spoke briefly to the Apache children. Soon Mary was sliding down the hill with the others, her initial nervousness giving way to delighted squeals that needed no translation. Sarah, who had emerged from Singing Bird's wickiup in time to witness this interaction, felt her heart constrict at the sight of her daughter's joy and Running Wolf's gentle patience. He caught her watching and straightened, suddenly self-conscious. "She play good with others now," he said as he approached. "A strong spirit in small body?" "Like her father," Sarah replied softly. "Daniel always said Mary was the one most like him, stubborn but kind-hearted." A shadow crossed Running Wolf's face at the mention of Daniel Blackwood. "You miss husband," he stated rather than asked. "Yes," Sarah admitted, "but not in the way you might think. Daniel and our marriage wasn't one of great passion. He was kind to me and a good father to our children, but there were times when we were more like friends than—" She trailed off, embarrassed by her candor. Running Wolf nodded, seeming to understand what she couldn't quite express. "Different kinds of love, all have value." Before Sarah could respond, a murmur spread through the camp. She turned to see Chief Grey Thunder emerging from his wickiup, followed by several elders. The old chief's face was grave as he gestured toward the central fire pit, which had been cleared of snow in preparation for the council meeting. "It begins," Running Wolf said quietly. "Council meets now to decide." Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter air. "To decide about us, about you." "Both." His expression was resigned yet resolute. "You should stay with Thomas. This Apache business." "No," Sarah said firmly. "But if they're deciding my family's fate and yours, then I want to be there. I want to speak." Running Wolf frowned. "Women not speak in council usually." "I'm not an Apache woman," Sarah pointed out, "and I won't sit silently while others determine our future." After a brief internal struggle, Running Wolf nodded. "I ask Chief Grey Thunder. But prepare, many not want to hear white woman's words." As tribal members gathered around the central fire, Sarah instructed Emma to watch over Thomas and the younger children. Then, with her head held high, She followed Running Wolf to the council meeting, aware of the many eyes that tracked her movement, some curious, some hostile, some unreadable. Chief Grey Thunder sat cross-legged on a raised platform of sorts, with the male elders arranged in a semicircle around him. Swift Arrow and his supporters formed another semicircle, while Singing Bird and a few other respected women, including Willow Dance, stood slightly apart, their inclusion in such matters apparently unusual but tolerated. When Running Wolf approached with Sarah, a murmur of disapproval rose from Swift Arrow's group. The chief raised a hand for silence, his ancient face impassive as Running Wolf spoke to him in low tones, gesturing occasionally towards Sarah. After a long moment, Grey Thunder nodded once. "The white woman may listen," he announced in Apache, which Running Wolf translated for Sarah's benefit. "She may speak once before the council decides." Swift Arrow stepped forward immediately. "This is against our tradition," he protested. "She has no place here. Traditions bend or break," Grey Thunder replied evenly. "Like trees in strong wind, the woman's children are involved. She has right to hear." With that settled, the council began. Much of the discussion was in Apache, with Running Wolf providing abbreviated translations for Sarah during pauses. Swift Arrow spoke at length about the dangers of allowing white settlers into their camp, of the betrayal of tribal law, and of his conviction that Running Wolf had been seduced by Sarah's presence into abandoning his loyalty to the Apache. Others spoke of the practical concerns, the soldiers who now knew their location, the possibility of more coming if the Blackwoods weren't released when promised, the dwindling winter supplies that were being shared with 7 additional mouths. Running Wolf remained silent throughout these accusations and concerns, his face a careful mask that revealed nothing of his inner thoughts. But Sarah could sense the tension in his body as he stood beside her, the slight stiffening of his shoulders each time Swift Arrow directed a particularly pointed comment his way. Finally, Running Wolf was invited to speak in his own defense. He moved to the center of the circle, his bearing proud, despite the weight of judgment upon him. "I broke tribal law," he began simply in Apache. "I do not deny this. But I followed a higher law. The law of humanity that says we do not turn away from those in need, especially children who have done no wrong." He recounted finding the Blackwood family in the abandoned cabin, describing Thomas's grave condition and the certainty that none would have survived the blizzard without help. "Daniel Blackwood treated our people with respect when many other white men showed only contempt," he continued. He traded fairly, spoke our language, and once gave medicine that saved my sister's child. When I found his widow and children dying in the snow, I remembered this. I remembered that an Apache warrior's honor is measured not just by his courage in battle, but by his compassion toward the vulnerable. Swift Arrow scoffed loudly. "Fine words to justify breaking our most important law. What happens when these settlers bring more of their kind? When our hunting grounds shrink further? When our children starve because white farmers have taken the valley? These settlers are 1 woman and 6 young ones," Running Wolf countered. "They do not threaten our way of life. Every white face in our territory threatens our way of life." Swift Arrow's voice rose with anger. "You were blinded by the woman's pale skin and soft words. You betrayed us for her." Murmurs of both agreement and disagreement rippled through the gathering. Chief Grey Thunder raised his hand again for silence, then turned to Sarah. "Now white woman speaks," he said in English. "Then council decides." All eyes turned to Sarah as she stepped forward, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. She took a deep breath, acutely aware that her words might determine not only her family's future, but Running Wolf's as well. Sarah stood in the center of the circle, keenly aware of the dozens of eyes fixed upon her. The crackling fire cast dancing shadows across the faces surrounding her, some openly hostile, others curious, a few sympathetic. She had never spoken before so many, let alone in circumstances where her words might determine the fate of the man who had saved her family. Her throat felt dry, her hands trembled slightly, but she clasped them tightly before her and raised her chin. "I know I am an outsider here," she began, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I understand that my presence, my family's presence, has caused discord among your people. For that, I am deeply sorry." Running Wolf translated her words into Apache, his deep voice carrying across the silent gathering. "But I am not sorry that Running Wolf found us," Sarah continued. "I am not sorry that he chose compassion over law. If he had not, my children and I would now be buried beneath the snow, and you would never have known we existed at all." She looked directly at Swift Arrow, whose face remained hard and unyielding. "I understand your fear. I know that white settlers have taken your lands, broken promises, treated your people with cruelty. My husband spoke often of these injustices. He believed, as I do, that there must be a better way, that we can live alongside each other with respect, not hatred." Sarah turned slowly, making eye contact with as many tribal members as she could. "My children have been welcomed by yours. They play together, learn from each other. Even now, my son Thomas is learning about healing plants from Singing Bird. Is this not a sign that we need not be enemies?" She paused as Running Wolf translated, noting the softening expressions on some faces, particularly among the women. Encouraged, she continued with growing passion. "As for Running Wolf, he has shown the highest form of courage. Not the courage of war, which is important, but the courage of peace, of standing alone for what is right, even when it costs him everything." Her voice caught slightly. "He knew the price he would pay for helping us. He knew your law, yet he chose to save 6 innocent children and their mother because that, too, is a sacred duty." Swift Arrow interrupted, speaking rapidly in Apache. Running Wolf hesitated before translating. He says your words are clever but meaningless, that you speak of peace while your people prepare for war, that soldiers already come because of you." Sarah nodded, acknowledging the accusation. "The soldiers come because my cousin feared for our safety. They do not come to fight, but to bring us to Fort Benton. When Thomas is well enough, we will go with them. We will tell them that your people showed us kindness when we needed it most. We will speak of the wisdom of Chief Grey Thunder, who sheltered strangers despite the risk." She turned directly to the chief, whose weathered face remained unreadable. "But if you banish Running Wolf for the crime of saving my family, what message does that send? That compassion is weakness, that mercy deserves punishment." The camp had grown utterly silent, even the children sensing the importance of the moment and holding their play. Sarah's next words emerged softly, but with conviction that carried to every ear. "My husband once told me that the Apache believed the Creator placed all people on this earth with a purpose. Running Wolf's purpose that day was to find us, to save us. If you cast him out for fulfilling that purpose, you diminish not just him, but yourselves." With that, she stepped back, her heart pounding in her chest. Running Wolf's expression as he finished translating her final words was one of quiet amazement, as though he had never quite seen her before. Chief Grey Thunder sat motionless for several long moments. Then he rose, his joints creaking audibly in the silence, and addressed the gathering in Apache, Running Wolf did not translate immediately, seemingly transfixed by the chief's words. "What does he say?" Sarah whispered anxiously. Running Wolf turned to her, his eyes reflecting complex emotions. "He says you speak with heart of Apache woman, though your skin is white. He asks council to consider that perhaps Great Spirit sent you to test us, to see if we remember what it means to be human before we are Apache." Grey Thunder continued speaking, his voice carrying the weight of decades of leadership. When he finished, the council erupted in a flurry of discussion, with Swift Arrow gesturing emphatically and others responding with varying degrees of agreement or dissent. "They decide now," Running Wolf murmured to Sarah. "We wait." The deliberations continued as the sun inched across the winter sky. Sarah was eventually led back to her wiki-up, where she found her children engaged in various activities with their new Apache friends. Emma was helping Thomas sit up outside, wrapped in furs, but clearly enjoying the fresh air and sunshine. The sight of her children's contentment amid such uncertainty brought tears to Sarah's eyes. "Ma, what's happening?" Emma asked, noticing her mother's emotional state. "Are they going to make us leave?" Sarah composed herself quickly. "No, dear, not today. The council is deciding many things." "About Running Wolf?" Thomas asked unexpectedly. His young face was solemn beyond his years. "Singing Bird told me he might have to go away because he helped us." Sarah sat beside her son, choosing her words carefully. "That's one of the things they're deciding. Running Wolf broke one of their important rules by bringing us here." "But he saved us," James protested, having joined the conversation. "Why would they punish him for that?" "Rules exist for reasons we don't always understand," Sarah explained. "The Apache have survived in this harsh land by following their traditions. Breaking those traditions, even for a good reason, has consequences." "It's not fair," Emma declared with the absolute certainty of youth. "No," Sarah agreed softly, "it's not." As afternoon faded toward evening, Willow Dance approached their dwelling. Her expression gave nothing away as she addressed Sarah. "Council finished. Chief Grey Thunder ask you come. Children stay." Sarah's stomach knotted with anxiety. She squeezed Thomas's hand reassuringly, straightened her shawl, and followed Willow Dance back to the central fire, where the council members still sat in their circle. Running Wolf stood slightly apart, his posture rigid, his face a careful mask. Sarah could not tell from his expression what had been decided. Chief Grey Thunder beckoned her forward. Through Running Wolf's translation, he spoke formally. "Woman called Sarah Blackwood. Council has spoken on two matters. First, you and your children may remain in our camp until the boy is well enough to travel with the soldiers who come tomorrow. This is decided." Sarah nodded, relieved, though not surprised by this decision. "Thank you, Chief Grey Thunder. Second matter more difficult," the chief continued, his ancient eyes moving between Sarah and Running Wolf. "Our law says one who brings outsiders to camp must leave tribe. This law protects us, has protected us for many generations." Sarah's heart sank. Despite her impassioned plea, they were going to banish Running Wolf after all. "But council also remembers older law," Grey Thunder went on. "Law that says life is sacred, that innocent ones must be protected, especially in winter's harshest time." A murmur ran through the gathered tribe members. Swift Arrow's expression had darkened considerably, suggesting the council's decision had not aligned with his wishes. "Running Wolf broke one law to follow another," the chief stated. "He chose compassion over safety." "This is not simple matter." Grey Thunder rose to his feet with the help of a gnarled staff. He approached Running Wolf and stood before him, weathered face to weathered face, elder to warrior. "Council decides this. Running Wolf will not be banished. Sarah released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her eyes filling with tears of relief. "But," the chief continued, raising a hand to silence the murmurs that had broken out, "he must leave camp when soldiers return. He must go with White Woman and her children to fort, stay one full cycle of moon, learn ways of White World, as they have learned ways of Apache, be bridge between our peoples." Running Wolf's composure faltered momentarily, surprise evident in his widened eyes. "Be after one moon," Grey Thunder concluded. "Running Wolf may return to tribe if he chooses, or he may choose new path. This is Council's wisdom." Swift Arrow stepped forward, clearly displeased. "This is not our way. He broke tribal law. The punishment is clear." "Old ways bend or break in storm," Grey Thunder replied implacably, "like trees in wind. Apache survive because we are strong but not rigid." "Council has spoken." With that, he touched Running Wolf's shoulder briefly, a gesture of respect and affection, then walked slowly back to his wickiup, effectively ending the council. The tribe dispersed gradually, some approaching Running Wolf to clasp his arm or speak quiet words, others following Swift Arrow, who stalked away without looking back. Sarah stood rooted to the spot, trying to process what had just happened. Running Wolf was not to be banished permanently, but he was being sent away with her family, to the White World he barely knew. When most had gone, Running Wolf finally approached her, his expression a complex mixture of relief, uncertainty, and something deeper she couldn't quite name. "You spoke well," he said simply, words from heart. "They listened," Sarah replied, still somewhat stunned by the outcome. "But now you must leave your home because of us." Running Wolf looked out over the camp, his gaze lingering on the mountains beyond. Not forever, one moon cycle, then choice. "Will you come with us?" Sarah asked, suddenly uncertain. "To Fort Benton." He met her eyes directly. "Chief Grey Thunder give order, I follow. But is it what you want?" Running Wolf was silent for a long moment. "Want not matter, duty matters." "Honor matters," he paused, then added more softly, "But yes, I come with Blackwood family." As they stood together in the gathering twilight, with the camp settling around them and the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky, Sarah realized that tomorrow would bring yet another journey into the unknown. The soldiers would return, expecting to escort her family to Fort Benton. Now Running Wolf would join them, stepping into a world as foreign to him as the Apache camp had been to her. And what lay beyond that, for him, for her children, for herself, remained as vast and mysterious as the Montana sky above them. The soldiers returned as promised on the third day, bringing with them an army doctor and a wagon padded with blankets and furs. Sergeant Miller seemed surprised to find Thomas much improved, sitting up and talking animatedly about the healing plants Singing Bird had taught him. "The Apache medicine woman saved him," Sarah explained as the doctor examined the boy. "Her remedies brought down his fever when I thought we might lose him." The doctor, a young man with kind eyes and a Boston accent, nodded thoughtfully. "Fascinating. Some of these native remedies are quite effective. I'd be interested to learn more about them." But the real shock for the soldiers came when Chief Grey Thunder announced that Running Wolf would be accompanying the Blackwoods to Fort Benton. "An Apache warrior. In the fort?" Miller questioned, his hand instinctively moving toward his sidearm. "Ma'am, that's highly irregular." "He saved my family's lives," Sarah replied firmly. "He's coming with us, or we're not going." Miller looked from Sarah to Running Wolf, whose imposing presence and steady gaze made the sergeant reconsider his objection. "Very well," he conceded reluctantly. but I'll have to notify the fort commander ahead of our arrival." The departure from the Apache camp was bittersweet. Thomas clung to Singing Bird, who pressed a small pouch of medicines into his hand. Emma and Rebecca embraced Willow Dance, while James and his new friends exchanged solemn handshakes as if they were seasoned warriors. Chief Grey Thunder approached Running Wolf as the final preparations were made. The two men spoke quietly in Apache for several minutes, then clasped forearms in the traditional warrior's farewell. "What did he say to you?" Sarah asked as they boarded the wagon. Running Wolf's expression was contemplative. "He say path between two worlds not easy to walk, but those who can walk it may build bridge for others to follow." The journey to Fort Benton took 4 days, the wagon moving slowly through the snow-covered landscape. Running Wolf rode alongside on a horse provided by the Apache, his presence causing whispers and stares from settlers they passed along the way. Each night, as they camped beside the trail, the children gravitated toward Running Wolf, listening intently as he shared Apache stories beneath the vast Montana sky. Sarah watched these interactions with a growing warmth in her heart. Seeing how naturally he had become part of their family circle, Fort Benton, when they finally arrived, was a bustling trading post on the Missouri River, its stockade walls enclosing a small but growing settlement. Sarah's cousin Martha, a plump, energetic widow, welcomed them with tears and embraces, though she regarded Running Wolf with undisguised apprehension. "He's staying with us," Sarah informed her matter-of-factly. "Without him, we wouldn't be here at all." The first weeks at Fort Benton were challenging for everyone. The Blackwood children had to adjust to the confines of Martha's small house after the freedom of the Apache camp. Running Wolf struggled with the noise, the crowds, and the constant stares and whispers that followed him through the streets. But gradually, things began to change. Thomas's remarkable recovery and his enthusiastic accounts of Singing Bird's healing methods sparked the interest of the fort's doctor, who sought out Running Wolf's knowledge of medicinal plants. James proudly demonstrated Apache hunting techniques to his new schoolmates, earning respect instead of ridicule. Even Martha began to soften toward their Apache guest when he repaired her leaking roof with a skill no local handyman had managed. As the weeks passed, Sarah watched Running Wolf navigate this new world with the same quiet dignity he had shown in his own. He learned quickly, adapting to strange customs without surrendering his identity, earning the grudging respect of even the most skeptical settlers. One evening, as winter gave way to the first whispers of spring, Sarah found Running Wolf standing alone on the bluff overlooking the Missouri River, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "You miss your people," she said, coming to stand beside him. "Yes," he admitted, "but also learning much here." "Different world, not better, not worse, just different. The moon cycle is nearly complete," Sarah said carefully. "Chief Grey Thunder said you could return after one moon. Is that what you wish to do?" Running Wolf turned to face her, his eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. "Chief also say I can choose new path." He took her hand, his touch gentle yet certain. "Maybe path is not with tribe only, not with white world only. Maybe path is between, bringing both together." Sarah's heart quickened. "What are you saying, Running Wolf?" "I saying I care for Sarah Blackwood, care for her children, want to protect, to build good life." His gaze was steady, unflinching. "But must know if Sarah feels same." "I do," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "I've known it since you carried Thomas through the blizzard, since you taught Mary to be brave, since you faced banishment to save us." Running Wolf's rare smile transformed his face. "Then I choose path with you. Build bridge between worlds for children to cross freely." "It won't be easy," Sarah cautioned. "There will be those who cannot accept us together, like Swift Arrow, like some here at Fort D," Running Wolf agreed. "But others will learn. Children already know. They live in both worlds without fear." As if to prove his point, they turned to see Thomas approaching with the fort doctor, engaged in animated discussion about a plant specimen. Behind them came the other Blackwood children with several local children playing a game that somehow combined elements of both cultures. "Look," Running Wolf said softly. A bridge already beginning. In the glow of the setting sun, with the Missouri flowing endlessly eastward and the mountains standing watch in the west, Sarah and Running Wolf sealed their promise with a kiss that bridged more than just the space between them. It bridged two worlds that had been separated by fear and misunderstanding for too long. Later, as they walked hand in hand back to Martha's house, where the children waited, Sarah thought about the impossible choice Running Wolf had faced that snowy day when he'd found her family huddled in the abandoned cabin. He had chosen to save them, knowing it might cost him everything. Instead, it had given them all something none could have imagined, a family forged in hardship, strengthened by compassion, and now poised to build a life that honored both the traditions of his ancestors and the promise of a shared future. In the end, his choice had not been between his people and hers. It had been a choice to recognize that beneath the differences of language and custom, they were all simply people, capable of both tremendous cruelty and extraordinary kindness. And in choosing kindness, even at great personal cost, Running Wolf had not only saved 7 lives, but had opened a door to a world where perhaps others might one day follow, finding their own paths between the separate worlds that needn't remain divided forever.